My boyfriend called me pathetic and desperate for asking why he took his ex to the concert with the VIP tickets I bought for our anniversary, then laughed and said I was too clingy to understand real dating, and that maybe she deserves nice things more. My blood is still boiling. My boyfriend, Tobias, just texted me a dinner invitation, claiming he has something important to tell me. The same Tobias who, just last weekend, sent me a shirtless selfie from another woman's bed accompanied by a smug caption about trust. You guys, I'm honestly wondering if he's lost his mind, or if this is some twisted, elaborate test to see how much disrespect I'm willing to swallow. Because after the absolute emotional roller coaster of the last 3 weeks, I'm starting to think it's both. Let me rewind and explain how we even got to this insane point. Because this whole situation has been such a spectacular train wreck, I genuinely need to recount it just to make sense of it myself. Plus, I desperately need you guys to tell me if I'm the crazy one, or if my boyfriend has completely annihilated every single boundary that exists in a relationship. It all started 3 weeks ago. Tobias came home from work and casually dropped a bombshell. His friend, Andrea, was apparently having roommate drama. Her roommate had suddenly bailed with 2 weeks' notice, leaving Andrea in a frantic panic about making rent. A normal friend crisis, right? My first thought was to be supportive, maybe suggest some roommate-finding apps. But then Tobias, with a straight face, dropped the bomb as if it were the most reasonable, logical thing in the world. He announced, not asked, announced, that he was going to stay at Andrea's place for a few weeks to help her with rent while she found someone new. Just like that. No discussion with me. No asking how I felt. Just a casual declaration that my boyfriend was essentially moving in with another woman. I actually laughed. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? I truly thought he was joking. Who in their right mind announces they're moving in with a female friend and expects their girlfriend to just smile and wave? But Tobias wasn't laughing. He was looking at me with this irritatingly righteous expression, as if I should be impressed by his generosity, his heroism. When I managed to pick my jaw off the floor and tell him, very clearly, that I was not comfortable with that arrangement, his face hardened. He got this incredibly condescending look and actually called me selfish. Selfish, like wanting my boyfriend to not live with another woman makes me some kind of terrible person. He then doubled down, claiming that if I trusted him, this wouldn't be an issue, and that my reaction was showing my true colors. I tried so hard to explain that this wasn't about trust. It was about boundaries. It was about respect. I told him most couples, regardless of their trust levels, wouldn't be okay with this kind of setup. But Tobias just kept circling back to this infuriating narrative that I was being controlling and insecure, as if those were dirty words that should make me back down and apologize. The argument dragged on for hours, a relentless, exhausting cycle. He even started bringing up random, irrelevant examples, like when I'd been friendly with male coworkers, or when my ex, Brian, texted about some old stuff at my place. He genuinely acted like those situations were somehow equivalent to him literally living with another woman. The mental gymnastics he performed were honestly impressive, bordering on Olympic-level manipulation. What really grated on my nerves was how he continuously framed Andrea's situation like she was some helpless victim who would surely end up homeless without his personal, heroic intervention. This woman is 25, has a decent job, and graduated college. She's far from helpless. There are a million ways to handle roommate issues that don't involve my boyfriend moving in a playhouse with her. But according to Tobias, I was the heartless one for suggesting alternatives. Every single solution I proposed was shot down because, apparently, nothing could possibly work except him personally saving the day by becoming her temporary live-in roommate. His hero complex was absolutely unreal. And the absolute worst part? I later found out that Andrea knew all about our fights. Tobias had been discussing our relationship problems with her, getting her input on how to handle my supposed trust issues. The sheer audacity of them analyzing my behavior and strategizing about our relationship behind my back made my blood absolutely boil. So, I held my ground. I told him, again, that I wasn't comfortable and that there had to be other ways to help Andrea. I thought, naively, that maybe he'd respect my feelings enough to find a compromise. Boy, was I wrong. Last Friday night, Tobias announced he was going over to Andrea's place to help her organize her spare room for potential roommate interviews. He said he'd probably stay late since they had a lot to sort through. Fine, whatever. I had plans with my friend Laura anyway, so I didn't think much of it. But then Saturday morning rolled around, and I hadn't heard from him. No good morning text, no check-in, nothing. When I finally texted him asking how the organizing went, he responded with the most casual message, saying he'd ended up crashing there because they worked until really late and he was too tired to drive home. I was annoyed, but I tried to be understanding. Maybe they really had worked late, and it was a practical decision. But then, around noon, my phone buzzed with a notification that made my blood run cold. It was a selfie from Tobias. He was in Andrea's bed, shirtless, with the caption, "Some people trust, some people don't." I stared at that picture for a solid 5 minutes, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. My boyfriend had spent the night at another woman's place, woke up in her bed, and then decided the appropriate response was to send me a photo proving it, complete with some smug, passive-aggressive caption about trust. The audacity was breathtaking. Who does that? Who thinks sending their girlfriend a shirtless selfie from another woman's bed is going to prove a point about trust? It was like he was deliberately trying to push every single one of my buttons. I called him immediately. He answered on the first ring, sounding way too cheerful. When I asked him, through gritted teeth, what the hell he thought he was doing sending me that picture, he had the absolute nerve to act confused. He claimed he thought I'd appreciate him being transparent about where he was, instead of hiding it. Transparent. As if taking a selfie in another woman's bed is transparency and not a deliberate provocation. The conversation escalated rapidly. I told him that sending that picture was disrespectful, deeply hurtful, and that spending the night at Andrea's place crossed a massive line for me. But instead of apologizing, instead of showing any understanding of why I was so upset, he doubled down. He said I was proving his point about not trusting him, and that if I was secure in our relationship, I wouldn't be making such a big deal about him helping a friend. He actually had the audacity to say that my reaction was exactly why he needed to reconsider our relationship dynamics. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about Andrea's roommate situation anymore. This was about Tobias testing how much he could get away with, seeing how far he could push my boundaries before I'd finally snap. And honestly, he was about to find out. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit subscribe, because this wild ride, it's only just beginning. And trust me, there are more unbelievable stories coming your way. But the real kicker came Sunday evening when I got a Facebook message from Andrea herself. I'd never spoken to this woman directly in my life, but apparently, she felt entitled to insert herself into our relationship drama. Her message was short and, in her mind, probably sweet. She told me that I should grow a backbone if I wanted to date someone like Tobias, and that my insecurity was embarrassing to watch. She finished by saying Tobias deserved someone who could handle him having female friends without creating drama. I screenshotted that message so fast it wasn't even funny. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of this woman to message me about my own relationship was beyond anything I could have imagined. And the fact that she was clearly discussing our private business with Tobias made my blood boil even hotter. When I confronted Tobias about Andrea's message, he barely seemed surprised. He actually defended her. He said she was just looking out for him, because she could see how stressed our fights were making him. He actually defended her right to message me, and said maybe I should listen to what she had to say. That was the moment I realized I was dating someone who thought it was perfectly appropriate for his female friend to lecture his girlfriend about relationship boundaries. Someone who saw nothing wrong with another woman telling me how to handle my own boyfriend. So here we are, 3 weeks into this absolute disaster. And Tobias just texted asking if I want to have dinner tonight, so he can tell me something important. Part of me was morbidly curious about what he thought was so important that it required a special announcement. But a much bigger part of me was already planning exactly what I was going to say to him. Because while Tobias has been playing these little games and testing my boundaries, I'd been doing some planning of my own. And I think it was time for him to learn that some tests go both ways. Okay, I don't even know where to begin with what just happened at dinner. I'm literally sitting in my car in the restaurant parking lot right now because I cannot even process what Tobias just pulled. So, remember how he wanted to meet for dinner to tell me something important? Well, buckle up, because this man has completely lost his mind, and I'm honestly questioning if I ever truly knew him at all. I got to the restaurant first and spent about 10 minutes mentally preparing myself for whatever bombshell he was about to drop. A tiny part of me, a hopeful, foolish part, Was praying maybe he'd come to his senses about the whole Andrea situation and wanted to apologize. Nope, not even close. Tobias walked in looking way too confident for someone who had spent the weekend disrespecting his girlfriend in every possible way. He slid into the booth across from me with that smile I used to think was charming, but now just looked sickeningly smug. No apology, no acknowledgement of how messed up the last few days had been. Just casual small talk like nothing had happened. When I finally asked him what was so important that we needed a special dinner conversation, he got this serious, almost solemn expression and said he'd been doing a lot of thinking about our relationship and where things were heading. My stomach dropped, because that tone usually means someone's about to get dumped. But instead of breaking up with me, he launched into this whole pre-rehearsed speech about how he'd realized our recent conflicts had shown him concerning patterns in my behavior. He said he was worried about my trust issues and how they might affect our future together. The sheer audacity of this man to flip the script and make me the problem after everything he'd done was absolutely mind-blowing. I interrupted him right there and asked if he was seriously sitting across from me trying to make his inappropriate behavior my fault. But he just kept going with his little speech about how relationships require trust and compromise, and how he'd been reflecting on whether I was really ready for the kind of mature relationship he was looking for. Then he dropped the real bomb. He said he decided to move forward with helping Andrea, regardless of my feelings about it, because he wasn't going to let my insecurities dictate how he treated his friends. He announced this like it was some noble stand he was taking for friendship and loyalty. I stared at him for a solid 30 seconds, trying to process what I just heard. This man had just told me he was moving in with another woman despite my clearly stated boundaries, and he was framing it like some principled decision rather than a massive betrayal of our relationship. I asked him point blank, "Are you actually telling me that you are choosing to prioritize Andrea's housing situation over my comfort and our relationship boundaries?" His response: he wasn't choosing anyone over anyone else. He was just refusing to abandon a friend in need because his girlfriend couldn't handle it. The conversation that followed was honestly surreal. Tobias kept insisting this wasn't about choosing Andrea over me. It was about me learning to trust him and support his friendships. He actually said that if I really loved him, I'd want him to be the kind of person who shows up for his friends when they need help. Every single time I tried to explain why his decision was hurtful and disrespectful, he'd counter with some variation of how my reaction proved I wasn't ready for a serious relationship. He kept using phrases like emotional maturity and healthy boundaries, but apparently, those concepts only applied to me adapting to whatever he wanted to do. What really got me was how he kept acting like I was asking him to abandon Andrea completely, rather than just maintain appropriate boundaries. When I pointed out that there were a million ways to help a friend that didn't involve moving in with them, he said those alternatives wouldn't be as effective, and that Andrea specifically needed someone she could trust living in her space. I asked him why it had to be him specifically, and he said Andrea had asked him because she felt safest with him. The way he said it made it crystal clear that he was incredibly flattered by being her chosen protector, and that my discomfort was just an inconvenient obstacle to his hero fantasy. The whole conversation felt like he was reading from some kind of manipulation playbook. Every concern I raised was reframed as a character flaw on my part. Every boundary I tried to set was dismissed as controlling or insecure. It was like arguing with someone who had already decided I was wrong about everything and was just going through the motions of pretending to listen. What made it even worse was how calm and rational he was being while completely steamrolling over everything I was saying. He had this condescending therapist voice going, like he was helping me work through my issues rather than defending completely inappropriate behavior. When I asked him how he'd feel if the situation was reversed, and I decided to move in with some male friend to help him out, Tobias actually laughed. He said that was completely different because he trusted me and wouldn't feel threatened by something like that. The smugness in his voice when he said it made me want to throw my water glass at his head. I pressed him on that blatant double standard and asked him to really think about whether he'd be okay with me living with another man for several weeks. That's when his whole calm, rational act started to crack a little. He said the situations weren't comparable because Andrea genuinely needed help, while my hypothetical male friend would just be taking advantage of my kindness. The mental gymnastics were, I swear, Olympic-level impressive. Somehow, when Andrea needed help, it was a legitimate crisis that required Tobias's personal intervention. But if I were to help a male friend in the exact same way, that guy would automatically be a user trying to take advantage of me. The double standard was so blatant, it was almost funny. But the real kicker came when I asked him what he expected our relationship to look like while he was living with Andrea. Would we still see each other regularly? Would I be welcome to visit him at her place? How long was this arrangement supposed to last? That's when Tobias got really uncomfortable and started giving me vague, non-answers about how we'd figure it out as we went along. He said he couldn't put a timeline on helping a friend, and that I'd need to be flexible about our usual routines while Andrea got back on her feet. When I pushed for more specifics, he finally admitted it. Andrea wasn't really comfortable with me coming around while she was dealing with her housing stress. He said she felt like my presence might create tension and drama that would make an already difficult situation even harder for her. So, let me get this straight. My boyfriend was moving in with another woman who didn't want me visiting for an indefinite period of time to help with a problem that could be solved in dozens of other ways. And somehow, I was the unreasonable one for having an issue with this arrangement. I asked him if he could hear how insane that sounded. And he, stone-faced, said Andrea's feelings were valid, too, and that everyone involved deserved to feel comfortable in their living space. Apparently, everyone except me, since my feelings about my own boyfriend's living arrangements didn't seem to matter at all. I sat back in that booth and really looked at the man across from me, and I realized I was seeing him clearly for the first time in 8 months. This wasn't some temporary lapse in judgment or miscommunication about boundaries. This was who he actually was when he couldn't manipulate me into going along with what he wanted. So, I asked him one simple question. I said, if our roles were reversed and I announced that I was moving in with some guy, despite your objections, would you be okay with that? Not just okay, but actually supportive and understanding about it. The look that crossed his face told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. For just a split second, his mask slipped, and I saw exactly how he really felt about the idea of me prioritizing another man's needs over his comfort. But then he caught himself and went back to his rational therapist voice. He said that hypothetical situations weren't helpful, and that we needed to focus on the actual circumstances we were dealing with. When I pointed out that his inability to answer my question was pretty telling, he said I was trying to trap him, and that my argumentative attitude was exactly why he was concerned about our relationship dynamic. Everything was my fault. My argumentative attitude, my trust issues, my inability to support his friendships, my lack of emotional maturity. According to Tobias, I was basically a walking red flag who was lucky he was patient enough to help me work through my problems. By the time we left the restaurant, he'd made it crystal clear that he was moving in with Andrea whether I liked it or not, and that my job as his girlfriend was to smile and be supportive while he played house with another woman who specifically requested that I stay away. But here's the thing that Tobias doesn't realize. While he was busy outlining all the ways I needed to change my behavior and attitude, I was making some plans of my own. Because if he thinks I'm just going to sit around waiting for him to come back from his little domestic experiment with Andrea, he's about to learn exactly how wrong he can be. I've got some thinking to do tonight, and tomorrow, I'm making some phone calls. If Tobias wants to test my boundaries and see how much disrespect I'll tolerate, he's about to get his answer. And something tells me it's not going to be what he's expecting. You guys, I am having way too much fun with this situation. And honestly, watching Tobias dig himself deeper and deeper into this hole, all while thinking he's being so clever, has become my new favorite entertainment. If he wants to play games and test my boundaries, well, two can definitely play that game. So, remember how I said the gloves were coming off? Well, I spent Wednesday making some calls and setting things in motion. And let me tell you, I've been having an absolute blast watching this whole thing unfold. Wednesday night, Tobias texted me this casual little announcement about packing his stuff to move into Andrea's place over the weekend. No discussion, no checking in, just this matter-of-fact message like he was telling me he picked up dry cleaning. The audacity was honestly impressive, but it also gave me the perfect opportunity to start having some fun. Instead of getting upset or arguing with him, I responded with, "That's nice, honey. Make sure you pack your toothbrush. Wouldn't want Andrea to think you have bad hygiene when you're playing house together." The passive-aggressive sweetness was chef's kiss perfect. He called me within 10 minutes, clearly confused by my response. When he asked why I was being sarcastic, I told him I wasn't being sarcastic at all. I was just being supportive of his new living arrangement with his female friend. The way I said supportive made it clear I was mocking him, but he couldn't quite call me out on it. That phone call was honestly hilarious. Tobias kept trying to bait me into an argument about boundaries and trust, but I just kept responding with these sweet, understanding comments that were obviously sarcastic, but technically supportive. Every time he'd explain why his decision was reasonable, I'd say something like, "Oh, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. I'm sure Andrea really appreciates having such a caring roommate." By the end of the call, he was clearly frustrated that I wasn't giving him the dramatic reaction he was expecting. He actually asked me directly why I wasn't more upset about his decision, and I told him that I'd been doing some thinking and had come to some interesting conclusions about our relationship. When he pressed me for details, I said we could discuss it later because I had some plans of my own to figure out. The confusion in his voice was absolutely delicious. He'd expected me to be begging him not to move in with Andrea, not making mysterious comments about my own plans. Thursday morning, I woke up to a string of texts from him documenting his packing progress, like I was supposed to care about the logistics of him moving in with another woman. He sent pictures of boxes and even asked if I wanted to help him load his car. The level of delusion was honestly breathtaking. But instead of ignoring the messages, I decided to have some fun with them. I responded to each picture with increasingly ridiculous comments. When he sent a photo of his clothes packed up, I wrote, "Make sure you pack something nice for your dinner dates with Andrea." When he showed me his toiletries box, I said, "Don't forget condoms. You never know what might happen during those late-night movie sessions." The fact that he couldn't tell if I was being serious or mocking him made it even better. He kept sending confused responses asking what I meant, and I'd just send back innocent emojis like I had no idea why he was confused. Thursday afternoon, I put phase 2 of my plan into action. Remember my ex, Brian, that Tobias had thrown in my face during our trust arguments? Well, I decided it was time for him to meet his match when it came to opposite-sex friendships. I texted Brian asking if he wanted to grab coffee and catch up, and his response was immediate and enthusiastic. When we met up, I told him about Tobias's living situation with Andrea, and Brian's reaction was everything I'd hoped for. He was shocked and said he couldn't believe any guy would disrespect his girlfriend like that. But here's where it gets